Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're interested in vocal technique, pick up my ebook called Becoming a Natural Singer, or if you want one-on-one help, book a lesson through my website or drop me an email, links in the description. So I want to talk about the insidious nature of these negative loops, of these negative cycles, and how they kind of seep into your soul, so to speak, and inhibit you from developing as a singer, inhibit you from getting better, inhibit you really from even discovering your voice or going on some type of a learning process with it. We're focusing on hard cases here. Why is it that for some of us singing is so difficult and for others singing is so easy? And there seems to be not much in the middle. If you've ever noticed, singers seem to either have it or they don't, and it doesn't feel like there's much in between. And there's a reason for that. I talked about reference points in an earlier video a couple of weeks back, and this idea of my own journey. When I started as a singer, I jumped in, started doing the exercises, started trying to get better, learn to sing. As I was doing that, I'm feeling sensations in my neck and throat. I'm trying to make adjustments. I'm experiencing what it feels like to use my voice for the first time. Now, at that time, I didn't realize that I had specific issues that other people don't have that made, for me, accessing head voice more difficult. Those being crude adjustment of the voice itself, crude technique, and reflux that I wasn't aware of. Both of those were feeding into a loop, a negative cycle. Now, over the years, I've focused on technique a lot. More recently, I've focused on reflux, and I have noticed progress. I've noticed a lot of progress quickly at times, and then I've plateaued and come down and up, as we all do. As I was on that journey, as I was going through the process, I didn't know that I had those issues. I didn't know that specific things were feeding back on themselves and creating problems for me. And I've spoke about this numerous times, but the cycle is this, is crude technique irritates the vocal folds. Irritated vocal folds tend to puff up a little bit. They tend to become less flexible. They tend to become less easy to use. And what does that feed back into? It makes technique harder to execute. When technique is harder, you push more, you get more aggressive, the vocal folds puff up more. You're in a loop. Now, compounding that can be reflux. You go to bed at night, you're not aware that there's acid coming up into your esophagus, and it is creating an acidic environment for the voice itself. What does that do? The vocal folds get a little bit irritated. They get a little bit puffy and inflamed. What does that do the next day? It feeds back into the technique, which is harder because your vocal folds are puffed. They're swollen a little bit. Technique's harder. You push more. You irritate the folds. Everything sends you into a cycle in itself, reinforcing. And the further you go down that road, the harder the technique gets. The more that you push, the more the folds swell up, and it's inescapable. It's so toxic to the environment that, of trying to develop as a singer. It is just grim. Now, the issue is this, is if you start as an adult, you've got these issues that you're not aware of, you have no baseline for a reference. Somebody that learns as a child, more than likely they don't have issues with their health. They don't have reflux issues when they're very young. Also, they don't tend to have clutter and mess and just nastiness in terms of bad coordination, bad habits that feed into the negative cycles. So they start at the baseline. You can imagine this. You can kind of think of it as a zero line for the voice. When the voice isn't swollen, it's flexible and pliable, and you can access head, you can access high notes easily. Now, that's where we want to start. That's the desirable reference point that we start at as when we're children. We learn from that baseline, and our expectation is, singing is easy, getting into head voice is easy, this makes sense. I don't have to work like crazy. The voice isn't thickening up. It's not getting irritated. It's staying thin. It's staying pliable. Makes technique easy, which keeps the voice thin, which keeps it pliable, which makes technique easy. So they're above that 0 point. They're above that baseline, and they're in the territory where you can learn and develop your voice. In contrast, people who start below the baseline, they've got reflux, they've got crude technique, they've got mess and clutter in their technique, they've got this sense of, I've got to do something to get high. All of that feeds into the negative cycle I just spoke about. What's their reference point? What's their baseline when they start? They're below the 0 point. They're below that line, and they are automatically feeding into the negative loops. So this is, I believe, the biggest issue for struggling singers is, and this is ultimately why we need a coach. We need somebody that can try and get us to some extent above that baseline, mostly with technique, but also sometimes with health. Are you eating too much? Are you eating late at night? What are you eating? These kind of questions. Are the vocal cords adjusting with finesse and detail? Are you clenching, doing all sorts of stuff you don't need to do to get high and go through your bridge? All that stuff. These are the questions a coach seeks to answer for you, and we are looking to just establish something consistent as you go up and down in the range. Just establishing consistent variables can help to start dragging us from the basement up towards the baseline and the starting point for the young singers. So the goal really, when you're learning this, at first, especially if you're a hard case, is to ask yourself, are you at the baseline? Is your voice pliable? Is getting to head easy? Do you feel like when you sing, it's no big deal? It's nothing to be scared of. All of these are signs that you're at or above the baseline. If you feel like whatever you do, whatever you try doesn't work, if you feel like there's lots of tension and push, if you feel like your voice is constantly swollen and thick feeling, if you feel like you just can't get any momentum going, you can't learn, you can't develop because your voice just seems to be harder than everybody else's, that's the sign that you are below that baseline. You've got a wonky reference point, and your idea of how easy the voice is to use and how pliable it should be is warped, is skewed, because you're in the basement, you're in that negative loop, you don't know it. And that's the thing, is a coach is trying to show you ultimately what you don't know and you haven't noticed or figured out yet. And if we can get you to the point where you're like, using my voice is simpler than I thought. Using my voice is not quite as crude and muscled and strength based as I thought. There's actually a kind of natural flow to the voice. And when I'm at the baseline, the real baseline, when the voice is pliable, when it's thin, when it's stretchy and it just feels mobile, that is or should be my quote unquote normal. That's what I'm searching to discover that I haven't quite found yet. Anyway, guys, let me know in the comments your thoughts. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.